I'm with Neil Charles, who's just stepped off stage from his presentation at the 4th OptaPro Forum. Neil, if you could just give us a bit of a overview of what your presentation was about and your experience presenting today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been, well, I suppose everybody really, if they're watching this, is familiar with what an expected goals model is. So I wanted to develop that a little bit and say the obvious implication of an expected goals model is the closer to the goal the better before you shoot. But that's a little bit unsatisfactory in terms of application because that's very, very difficult to do. So I wanted to start layering some passing data onto that, see if we could build a pass model that says how close can you get before you shoot.
I think that the thing that I really enjoyed about your presentation that I thought really spoke to the audience that were here today was around the use of actual examples, in-game examples, focusing on opportunities where certain players had chosen to shoot rather than pass, and using that as kind of the starting point for your analysis. Was that something you always had in mind when you were coming up with the idea, or was that something that developed later, or how did that happen?
No, that was Ryan, really, suggesting that the more video we could include, the better, the more real we could make it, the better. So I think without that suggestion, it probably would have been heat maps and a bit more theory. I'd still use the West Brom example that I used of it was just so stark that it's a single strategy, but that looks like an optimal strategy based on where you're launching the pass from. But in terms of the Barkley example I used, that came up very, very soon after being selected to present, and I just thought, right, I'll use that one because you see, and that one did light up Twitter in the blogging community in terms of why has he done that, and you go, well, actually the presentation needs to take that a step further and go, well, if we're going to say don't do that, we need to quantify the options that maybe he could have had and say they're better, how much better, how bad a choice was that, could it ever be a decent choice, which is what I really wanted to do.
I mean, you're somebody that's been involved in this world for kind of the last few years, I guess, 3.5 years or so. And I know you've presented posters at the previous OptaPro Forum. How do you feel the world has developed, the football analytics world has developed? Do you feel we're at the start of a much longer journey? Do you feel like we're kind of starting to uncover new ground? Where do you think we are?
So in terms of application to clubs, I'd have to defer to people who spend more time inside clubs. In terms of here, we've been talking about it outside of the coffee actually, the jump from 2 years ago when I first came to now is really quite substantial. So the presentations, and for the time, we were really strong presentations a couple of years ago, were mostly about ranking players on fairly raw statistics, things like segmentation, but kind of early stage segmentation, just breaking up players by the stats that they have. Yeah. And now you look at kind of machine learning models being applied. We've got physics coming up later in the day. We've got Gary's piece using segmentation trees and that sort of thing. So at least for here, I feel like the bar has gone up quite substantially in what you have to do. I think part of that's familiarity with the data and having a base of that. So, 2 years ago, expected goals itself would have got you through the door quite comfortably, I would think. Now it has to be expected goals, the limitations of, and what else can we do to further develop this concept. So I do feel like it's definitely improved.
I think from my perspective, I think that one of the things that's been really gratifying to see has been the kind of the greater levels of interest from the club world in the work that the community are doing, as well as a greater willingness to not challenge it necessarily, but to ask the obvious question, right, so how do I use that? And it's testing and it's challenging the kind of the amateur blogging world to kind of think in that context. I know you were in contact with Rory Campbell at West Ham during the process of your kind of creating your presentation. Did that help? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it really did. So we spent a couple of hours having a kind of after work beer and a chat through an early stage of the presentation, but at that stage I knew pretty much what the conclusion was going to be. I just hadn't written it all up. And it was Rory's insight, the real key one, was where I was concerned really, because I was focused on what I proposed, and what I proposed was, how does the optimal shooting location change for different teams in different games, different quality teams, and the analysis was saying, well, it doesn't really. The optimal location is about the same, and what changes is your chance of completing the pass and actually scoring. So the better you are, the more chance you're going to score, but the way you should try to score doesn't really change, at least for the analysis I've got. And I was a bit concerned about that because it was off proposal, whereas Rory took one look at that and went, great, that means any team can apply these findings. Well, when you put it like that,
absolutely,
lovely.
Yeah.
So that was a really good insight, and just to have, to chat to anybody who's that embedded in a club and hear what they have. And get the nod that expected goals wasn't going to frighten or surprise anybody, that sort of stuff, was really, really comforting, really good.
Excellent. And I guess finally, do you have ideas about how you're going to expand on the work you've done already, or do you see yourself going up in a different direction, or what's next with your presentation, I suppose?
I think it's a couple of weeks off to kind of think about what's
fair,
next.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things I'd really like to do. So when I first came into football analytics, it was through agent-based modelling. So simulating, rather than you've got a 65% chance of winning this game because on aggregate they have this many shots a game or whatever. You're simulating the game itself, the individuals in the game itself, how they pass completion chances, where they shoot from, all that sort of thing. That model still exists, that I did several years ago, is half rebuilt. And what I presented today feels like the next level input to that, to say you can then map pass completion percentages from wherever on the pitch to wherever, what decisions do the players actually take, and simulate games in a football manager-esque way to kind of get the underlying mechanics. So it's kind of where I came in 3 years ago, and I'd like to go back there, but with everything I've learned about expected goals and pass success and random forest models of pass success, and layer that onto what I was doing 3 years ago. See if I can lift it up and make it work better than it did then.
Look forward to seeing it. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Neil, thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Cheers.